This is Paul Singh, the Market Speculator, with the trade report for Tuesday, November 14th, 2017. Let's take a look at the market. Before we do that, let's look at Buffalo Wild Wings. Huge move after hours and pre-market here. I know some of you are still in this trade. You might be waking up and not even know this is happening. But let's detail what we did here. Buffalo Wild Wings was a breakout pullback. We entered around 113 on the show of strength right here, which is our classic breakout pullback play on earnings. And yesterday, acquisition talks, we got the big after hours. Now, I took profits in the 148s and got out completely. This thing could float up here or pull back into the gap. We don't know. The reason I took profits after hours is I've seen a lot of times where after hours, you've got these big pops. It has come down. Even if it's gapping, it might be at 134 instead of 148. Now, Buffalo Wild Wings, fortunately for those of you who are still in it, looks like it's going to open around 148. So you didn't lose anything by not being able to get out after hours. One comment here, I know some of you emailed me saying you couldn't trade after hours. Make sure your broker allows you to do that. Some brokers, you have to put in the request to be able to do that. So make sure you can trade after hours when something like this happens, or when something goes against you and you need to get out of a position. But at any rate, 148, I'm out completely. Huge win here, up about 30-something%. Now, those of you who are still in, there's a couple of ways to play this. It's up to you. One, just be happy with this huge profit and get out. The other way to play it would be to take half or 3/4 off, depending on your position sizing and what makes sense for you. Take a good chunk off, lock in that big gain, and then have obviously a trailing stop here. Now, our initial stop was down here around 110. It's not going to be there anymore. Normally, when we take partial profits, you move your stop up to entry. There's no point in doing that either. That would be giving up way too much gain. I would say 148 if you get out. At the lowest, 140. So at least you still lock in a huge win on that second half if it pulls back. But give it a little room, maybe somewhere between 140 and 145, depending on how much you're willing to give back, and then see if it will float up. So you're in a good position here going into the open. Again, normally I would at least hold a piece of it going into the open, but I was just not sure what was going to happen pre-market, and I didn't want to give up too much. So I got out completely. Done with the Buffalo Wild Wings trade. Now, the other trade, we were stopped out of Sina yesterday. This was a breakout pullback as well and pulled too far into the gap here. Now, interestingly, it's testing the 9 and the 50-day and actually could bounce here, but we had to get out because risk was going to be too high. So really small loss here, and then obviously the huge win in Buffalo Wild Wings. And then I entered SOXL yesterday, SOXL. This is the semiconductors 3 times leveraged ETF. So it's tracking what we watch every day, which is SMH, but it gives us that extra leverage. So we're going to get triple the move. For example, SMH was up 0.42% and SOXL was up 0.8%. Let me see if that's right. 0.4 to 0.8. Now, normally it would be triple. Sometimes they move on their own supply and demand, and this ended up only being double yesterday. But at any rate, basically holding this hammer here on Friday, and now we got the show strength at the 9, and the market is looking really strong. Obviously, semiconductors have led the market, so we're going to play on that. That it continues to lead. So entry was right in here yesterday. Target range is going to basically be the top of the range or a breakout. So we're playing the trend continuation here. Now we could play for a bigger move, and I'll reassess once we get to that level if we want to play through for a bigger move or just take that nice 2 to 1. Okay, so that's a recap on current positions. Let's just take a look at the markets real quick, and we're basically seeing the same pattern in SPY. Hammer holding back up over the 9, the Qs, pretty much the same pattern here. IWM beaten down and still lagging the other indexes. Biotech beaten down as well. We want to see if it can hold this low here. If we see a strong show of strength, some volume pulling into this sector, we could enter biotech with LABU like we traded last time. Oil still consolidating after this huge run. Tomorrow's the big day with the weekly oil inventories, but we'll see how it tests the 9. If it does start to break here, we could get into oil or play energy, energy, which is doing essentially the same thing. Then we've got retail, which has showed recent strength, and we've still got those department stores and retail stocks on our watch list. Finally, EWZ, there's nothing to do with it. It's been pretty much a bummer since pulling back from highs. We'll reassess if it ever does show some strength. And China still at highs here. So I've added 2 new stocks to the focus list. Race, which is not doing a whole lot right now, but has at least put in a little bit of a pivot here at 108. Now, a couple of ways to play this. One, we wait for the remount of these moving averages. That could get us back in for a run to the highs. And if it breaks this pivot low, we could even short here with Race, and then financials, FAS, showing strength again after a pullback off highs. I wouldn't enter until I see a break of the 9 EMA. And then the rest of the focus list essentially remains the same. Let's just review some of the FANG stocks. Facebook showing some strength. Again, I want to get above the 9. I almost took Netflix yesterday as I was taking the semiconductor ETF, but it's stalled right at the 9 intraday and pulled back. So I think this is going to be a key level. If it can get back up over the 9, so let's say we get a close, 9 is at 195.68. If we get a close at 196, I might look to enter Netflix again. Now I got stopped out on this pullback here, right in here, but I won't hesitate to get back in. Amazon put in a little bit of a tail at highs, so it needs to break. And then Google starting to pull back here. And we'll see, maybe it tests its breakout low and then puts in a run. So we'll keep an eye out on that. Other than that, focus list remains the same as yesterday. We're watching the same stocks. I'm going to continue to play it a little bit conservative right now. We have actually right now, the only position is SOX L going into the holiday next week. Maybe I add a couple of positions based on how the focus list is doing, but probably not going to get too aggressive.